In the news, lots going on this week in the news, and I want to just lay it on you tonight. This is China's social credit system. I've been telling you about this before, and it's growing. The dreamed New World Order model, that's what they're calling it, a New World Order model of the globalists. Sesame Credit is the all-encompassing technological and authoritarian system now used by China to control its citizenry. China has been emerging as a New World Order model for decades, and you really want to perk up when you hear that, because they're doing this as a pilot for countries all over the world. The New World Order model's plan is to use the friction created in these geopolitical battles to merge all the nations of the world under a one world government. That sounds just like Revelation. Many New World Order controllers have long displayed open admiration for the Chinese model of authoritarianism, centralized power, and the large amount of control it wields over massive populations. Recently, China introduced a massive society-wide system called Zima Credit, or Sesame Credit, a full-spectrum social credit system that assigns a score to citizens based on how good they are. Now, you have a credit score, but that's purely based on your financial status. In China, you have a score, but it's not only based on your financial status. Listen to it. The system is based on gamification. So there's a new word for you, gamification. It means gaming. It means scoring points or allocating points to people. The gaming of virtually every human endeavor itself based on the exploitation of brain chemistry, dopamine hints, by the way, and human psychology. However, it's not just a harmless game. It can have serious real-world consequences. Chinese journalist Li Hu felt the brunt of the Chinese New World Order model when he was denied the ability to buy property, take out a loan, or buy an airplane ticket, or even to travel on Chinese trains. For starters, we're told by none less than the Chinese Supreme Court itself that the underlying philosophy of Sesame Credit is to limit those who oppose the Chinese government. So what they're doing, and I won't read it all for you, in the USA there's a worldwide system of credit reports, we know that, and credit scores that allow banks and leaders to rank borrowers based on how credibility worthy they are, how much their finances are. But in China, it's not just based on your finances, it's based, you ready for this? Whether you pay your fines, your traffic fines or not, whether you pay your taxes, how well you obey traffic rules, other laws, your shopping and lifestyle habits, and here's the big one, how well you support the government. Matter of fact, your credit score can come down just based on the fact that you associate with somebody who has said something against the government. Clearly, it's a far-reaching and dangerous kind of technological social engineering which reduces the value of a human being to a number. Does that sound familiar? And essentially forces them to respect authority, does that sound familiar, in order to maintain their standard of living. In other words, you can't buy or sell unless this government tells you that you can because of the way your lifestyle is. So it's the Bible talks about the number of the beast and who can make war with the Antichrist, and basically about a perfect credit number. Really, the mark of the beast could be something like that. So we're watching these models start to come out more and more, and especially when they want to unite all of the global systems. Let me give you another one, transhumanism. We've been talking about transhumanism for a long time, and it's taking some advances and some steps up. Transhuman movement grows as thousands in Sweden get microchipped. The future is coming and is going to look very strange. In the past, many authors had raised the possibility of tyrannical governments forcibly microchipping their own population someday. But what if most of humanity actually embraces this new technology enthusiastically? Today, thousands of people in Sweden are eagerly having microchips inserted into their own hands, and it's rapidly becoming a natural part of society. Even in the United States, at one time, there was a great resistance to the idea of microchipping our pets. A lot of resistance to that. Now, it's almost universally accepted, as our resident veterinarian can tell you that. Personal microchips are being promoted as a way to make routine tasks faster, easier, more convenient. And Swedish biohackers are quite thrilled to be on the cutting edge of this new trend. Thousands of people in Sweden have inserted microchips which can function as a contactless credit cards, key cards, even rail cards into their bodies. Once the chip is underneath your skin, there's no longer any need to worry about misplacing a card or carrying a heavy wallet or a PIN number. Some have suggested that Sweden's strongest welfare state may be the cause of this recent trend, but actually, the factors behind why roughly 3,500 Swedes have had microchips implanted in them just this past month are more complex than you might expect. The phenomenon reflects Sweden's unique biohacking scene. If you look underneath the surface, Sweden's love affair with all things digital goes much deeper than these microchips. In Sweden, vast numbers of young people have embraced the idea that we can use technology to make humanity better. And that's why most Swedish biohackers are involved with transhumanist movement. Swedish biohackers are generally part of the transhumanist movement, and it is the transhumanists, or more specifically the subgroup grinders, who have been inserting NFC chips somewhere between their thumb and their index finger of thousands of Swedes. These are the same microchips that have been used for decades to track animals in packages. Sweden has been a hotbed of transhumanism for a very long time. In fact, a prominent transhumanism foundation known as Humanity Plus was co-founded by a Swedish man named Nick Bostrom in 1998. If you start looking at the movement, transhuman means beyond human. They think that we can take our DNA, I'll paraphrase, and we can merge it with machines, and we can become superhuman. So just imagine the draw that this could have for some people as this type of technology begins to take off. Do you think that there are some young people out there that would be eager to have supernatural powers? And all you have to do is look at some of the movies today in America. It's all about superheroes. Imagine telling young people that you can actually have a better brain than you normally are born with if you hook up to a computer. So we're watching this thing really grow. Antichrist in the world, the Bible says, wondered after him. Wouldn't the world want something like that? Well, the answer is yes. On a broader societal level, we will be told that fixing humanity's flaws could ultimately mean the eradication of all sickness, all disease, all poverty, and all war. And that's what the Antichrist is going to be heralded for. He's going to end all the problems of mankind. So the following is an excerpt from the article of The Guardian. The aims of transhumanist movement are summed up by Mark O'Connell in his book To Be a Machine, which last week won the Wellcome Book Prize. It is their belief that we can and should eradicate aging as a cause of death, that we can and should use technology to augment our bodies and our minds, that we can and should merge with machines, remaking ourselves finally in the image of our own higher ideals. What they're actually saying is it's a step up for us technologically, but it's also a step up for us humanitarianly, and it's the step up for us in the ecology of things, and it's talking about the evolution of mankind. They go on to say this: we will become gods, and we will be gods. We will no longer serve the human machine. We will now become a machine. It says, at this moment, technology is advancing at such a fast pace that it's never been seen in human history. And our society is going to be transformed in ways that we cannot even imagine right now. The transhumanists are promising to usher in a wonderful new utopia that will be the greatest era that humanity has ever known. Others believe the path will only lead to hell on earth. And so this is a secular article, by the way, and it pretty much parallels what we see and what we read in Revelation. Let me give you another one that's coming on. This is the government using spying hubs to intercept our emails, text, and phone calls. So I've been telling you about government and their intrusion into our lifestyles, into our privacy. But pretty much we don't see that. Everything's behind the scenes, it's in computers. So every now and then an article comes out and tells us the real implication of how deep the government is in spying on everyone. This one's one of those articles. It's supposed to be illegal for the NSA to spy on communications that are completely domestic, like you speaking on your phone. But that appears to be precisely what is happening. According to a brand new report from Ryan Gallagher and Henrik Molte of The Intercept, NSA documents indicate that the NSA is systematically capturing our emails, our phone calls, our text messages at certain key strategic points on AT&T's immensely powerful internet network. So AT&T, this article says, is working hand in hand with the NSA. And it goes on to tell you where their facilities are. They have large facilities in Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. In each of these cities, the Intercept has identified an AT&T facility containing networking equipment that monitors large quantities of internet traffic. A body of evidence including classified NSA documents, public records, and interviews with several former AT&T employees indicate that the buildings are central to the NSA spying initiative that has for years monitored billions of emails, phone calls, and online chats passing across U.S. territory. So Cheryl and I will be on the phone every now and then, and I'll say something about the government or something that I found out, and she'll say, don't say that on the phone. Now you would think that's silly, but that's really not silly. If there's a catchword in there, they can monitor that, and they can put me on a list and continue to monitor my emails and everything I do. In fact, according to an AT&T technician that worked for the company for 22 years, the NSA is able to capture all the data that's interchanged between AT&T's network and other companies. And because of the nature of how the network functions, AT&T is liable to carry everybody's traffic at one point or another during the day or the week or the year. Then it goes on to tell you where all these places are, and all the buildings that are in it are absolutely unbelievable. Among the pinpointed buildings, there's a nuclear blast resistant windowless facility in New York City's Hell's Kitchen, In Washington, D.C., a fortress-like concrete structure less than a half-mile south of the U.S. Capitol. In Chicago, an earthquake-resistant skyscraper in the West Loop Gate area. In Atlanta, a 429-foot Art Deco structure in the heart of the city's downtown district. In Dallas, a cube-like building with narrow windows and large vents on its exterior, located in the Old East District. Elsewhere on the west coast of the U.S., there are 3 more facilities. In downtown Los Angeles, a striking concrete tower near the Walt Disney Concert Hall and the Staples Center, 2 blocks from the most important internet exchange in the region. In Seattle, a 15-story building with blacked out windows and reinforced concrete foundations near the city's waterfront. And in San Francisco, south of Market neighborhood, a building where it was previously claimed the NSA was monitoring internet traffic from a secure room on the 6th floor. So why all the security? Why all the blacked out windows? Because these are spots that they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want any eavesdropping coming on it. They don't want any counter spying on them so that they can spy on everyone else. Now, I'll tell you what, the more I think about our government and the more I think about what's happening in America, I'm upset about America. I'm upset what's going on. Don't you know that they can flag you in anything they want? So when we're talking about a society that can number its people and find out where they are and look to where they're doing, all they need to do is track you by your phone. And they could track all your usage. They could tell whether it's just by your conversations, whether you're a Christian, whether you're not a Christian, whether you're for the gut, they can tell. And so it's an easy list for them to make up to hunt anybody down. It's pretty scary when you think about it. In the news again this week is a state that you all know. California. There it is. California considered creating an advisory group for fake news with Orwellian bill. So they've had 3 bills in California. First 2 were kind of innocuous, although we were concerned about them. Now there's another one. It's called the Senate Bill 1424. It will require California Attorney General to create an advisory committee by April 1st of 2019. And the council would need to consist of at least 1 person from the Department of Justice, representatives from social media providers, civil liberties advocates, and the First Amendment scholars. So this advisory group is going to look at everything that goes on the internet, anything on social media, and they're going to flag the ones that they think need to be taken off and they need to censor. Now, forget the fact that that's against our First Amendment rights. You have the right to say anything you want. Listen, I get people, I had a guy today yesterday comment from the YouTube, and it was the most vulgar language that I've ever heard and never saw in print, and he was watching one of my videos. Now, that's normally not the case, but I was really tempted to answer him back. I was tempted to say, maybe he's listening. I was tempted to say every other word was an F word that he gave, and it was pretty the expletives were they were all over the place. I wanted to tell him that I've known a lot of people that use that word regularly, and almost all of them are very ignorant. They're not knowledgeable at all. They have no vocabulary at all. So I wanted to suggest to him to just take out the dictionary and start reading the dictionary, because you can come up with some other adjectives. Maybe you should expand your vocabulary. I didn't, but now I just did. So we know that this is happening. California is considering there's an electronic frontier foundation that's going against them. And actually they've shot down one of the bills and they're going against them again. And so we know that this is a growing and worrying trend of legislators worldwide who want to censor information to decipher what is and isn't fake. So all they have to do is say that this is fake news. They don't want anybody to hear it. And when they do that, they could take anything they want off it. That's really kind of scary, because it reminds me of a Hitlerian society. It reminds me of doing something to put down the press or putting down the free speech. And that's what's happening in America. I never thought it would happen in America. That's our basis of our Constitution, is our free speech. And so when you see it start to come to this point, it's pretty bad. Let me give you one of the good news today. The Supreme Court upholds Trump travel ban. Why is that good? Because this goes on to say it was a 5-4 decision. The Supreme Court said that it's a 3rd travel ban, by the way. It's been modified. Now, I'm going to be very honest and very fair. When Trump first started saying this in his campaign, he was really saying about Muslims, which is not constitutional, by the way. You can't just blanket across that. He's now saying that there's terrorist, he took one of the nations, which was Chad, he took it off the list, which is Muslim. Most of the 22 Arab nations in the Middle East are 90 to 100% Muslim. So there's other nations that will now be able to be counterbalanced to come in. Iran, North Korea, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Venezuela. Chad was taking off the list. Now, why the Supreme Court said he was able to do that is they said he has the power, the constitutional power as the president of the United States, to limit who comes in because of national security. Sotomayor, which is a woman that is a liberal, was one of the dissenting voices, and she said we don't need to look at the Constitution. Pretty much, she said we need to look what he said in his campaign speech. Well, regardless of what he said, right or wrong, he has the constitutional backing to do it, and so the Supreme Court came through as a victory for the Trump White White House today. Let me give you this one. And by the way, he took no time in blaming the Democrats and the media for lambasting him over this, and he had every right to do that. Let me give you this also in the New World Order. The U.S. is poised to announce an exit from the UN Human Rights Council. So we're putting teeth into what we're saying. Secretary of State Mark Pompeo and U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley delivered the verdict on the UN Human Rights Council in a joint appearance at the State Department. And this is a quote: "For too long, the Human Rights Council has been a protector of human rights abusers and a cesspool of political bias," Haley said in announcing the withdrawal. "Regrettably, it is now clear that our call for reform was not heeded." Haley threatened to pull out last year, citing long-standing U.S. complaints that the 47-member council is biased against Israel. And she's absolutely right. Here's what amazes me. We have bemoaned that council for years and years and years. That council is made up pretty much of anti-Semites. There are nations that hate Israel that are on that council. So they will pass over human rights violations from China. They'll pass over human rights violations from Iran and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And they will tell us that Israel has human rights violations. I am so proud of our government for pulling out. I think the more organizations in the UN we could pull out of, the better. And maybe if we pull out of enough of them, we could do what I said a long time ago. Take a jackhammer that thing right off of New York, and just sail it out into the Atlantic Ocean. Wherever it lands, it lands. The UN is not anything that's helping anyone. Amen. It's a functionless body. Okay, everybody was so excited about the wedding. How many of you watched the wedding? That wedding. Who is that? That's Prince William. How many watched Prince William's wedding? How many watched his brother's wedding? All right. So you watch these weddings, and you look at Prince William, and you look at Prince Harry, and you think that they're English, and they have an alliance with us, and they have an alliance with Israel too. But listen to this article, because it's about Israel. The staff of Great Britain's Prince William has set off a controversy by listing Jerusalem under occupied Palestinian territories in the itinerary for his visit to the region. So he's visiting the region, and now his staff has set off a controversy by saying that Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. Now, we've declared it the capital of Israel. The irony is that two of the prince's own relatives chose to be buried in that same territory, and surely would have scoffed at the idea that the Palestinians are the territory's rightful owners. Before I go any further, let me tell you this. Do you know what this is called? This is called the royal family, right? They have royal blood. Does anybody have any idea why they're called the royal family and have royal blood? Well, you're not going to believe this, so I'm going to tell you, and I don't have enough time to teach it tonight. But William and his ancestors have been sitting on the seat of the throne of England for almost 1,500 years. And they are related. The Moravian dynasty, they're all related. That's why they all intermarry with the relatives. So we know the Windsors and the Moravians, they were all related. In 800 AD, they were, every single one that sat on any one of the European countries' seats as a king were all related. So they're related because, and you ready for this? They're related because they believe that their bloodline goes back to Jesus. They believe, and not necessarily him, this is the Moravian dynasty. The Moravian dynasty believes that Jesus escaped the cross, went to France with Mary Magdalene, had a child named Lucy. Lucy had children that were the Moravian dynasty, and they had royal blood. So when you talk about the royalty of England, it's how did they get to that spot? That's the ancient etymology of how they got there. So they have a tie, I said all that to say this, they have a tie in their minds to Israel and to Judaism, and they have an allegiance. They've had it for hundreds of years, except right now. So I know that blew you away a little bit, so listen. William's great-grandmother, Princess Alice, and her aunt, the great Duchess Elizabeth, are both buried in a small Christian cemetery on the Mount of Olives, near the largest Jewish cemetery in the world. You'll be there when I'm taking you to Israel. I'll show it to you. The Mount of Olives is a part of the city that the Palestinian Authority claims is Arab East Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority says the area should be the capital of Palestine, the Mount of Olives. And as such, according to the PA, in Jerusalem, Zionists, whether Jews or Christians, have no right to be there. They're illegal settlers. Here are some facts. The cemetery where the two royals are buried belongs to the Church of Mary Magdalene. I've been there many, many times. It sits on the Mount of Olives. It's a Russian Orthodox church and convent that was built at the foot of the Mount of Olives in 1896 by Tsar Alexander II. When we go visit it, and we will in September, remind me to show you their graves. It's located directly across the Kidron Valley from the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism. Princess Alice, who lived in Greece during World War II, hid a Jewish family from the Nazis and was posthumously honored by Yad Vashem as one of the righteous among the nations. Alice, who passed away in 1969, left instructions to be buried at Mary Magdalene's cemetery. Now you know why Mary Magdalene's. How many are with me? All right, it's because they think they're related. And her remains were transferred there in 1988. Prince Charles, the grandson of Princess Alice and heir to the throne of England, visited the graves of his grandmother and her aunt when he attended the funeral of Shimon Peres in 2016. But his visit to the Mount of Olives was undertaken secretly, without the knowledge of the public or news media, apparently for fear of offending the Palestinian Authority. It's easy to see why the Palestinian Authority would have been offended by Prince Charles' visits to the relatives' graves, and why they would be unhappy if Prince William wants to do likewise. Any focus on the Mount of Olives is a PR disaster for the Palestinians. It reminds the world that one of the most important Jewish religious sites in the world, situated in eastern Jerusalem, shattering the myth that it's an all-Arab territory that belongs to the Palestinians. The PA and its media allies routinely call it Arab East Jerusalem, but that's a lie. The Jewish people's roots in eastern Jerusalem go back thousands of years, long before any Arabs were ever there. Talking about the Mount of Olives is a public relations headache for Arab propagandists for another reason. Anybody who takes an even briefest glance at the Mount's recent history discovers that when the moderate Jordanians occupied it from 1949 to 1967, they destroyed thousands of Jewish tombstones, which they used for paving roads and building latrines in Jordanian army barracks. That experience reminds everyone how the Arab regimes have mistreated Jewish holy sites throughout the century, a legacy the PA itself has contributed to the present day with the repeated desecrations of the tomb of Joseph in Nablus, which is Shechem, by the way, also attacking on the tomb of Rachel in Bethlehem. That's one of the reasons why Israel put a wall there so they can't get to the tomb of Rachel. The existence of the Church of Mary Magdalene is another PR headache for the Palestinians. It was established in 1886, at a time when no Arabs called the area Palestine. They didn't even call themselves Palestinian. So how could they claim that area as theirs when in 1886 it was always Jewish, and England bought that piece of ground so they can build a church? The founders of the Mary Magdalene Church would have laughed at the notion that the land on which their church was built and where the remains of Alice and Elizabeth were settled is occupied Palestinian territory. The fact that Prince William's staff is calling Jerusalem occupied Palestinian territory is both a sad capitulation to Arab propaganda demands and a demonstration of their ignorance of the history of the city where two of England's own royals are buried. So we see this thing going way out of line. Talking about way out of line, I like what President Trump is doing, but I've told you this before, he's not going to broker a peace in the Middle East, especially not with this man. And I'm not talking about his personality, I'm talking about his thoughts on Palestinians. So I want to be very honest with you, I want to be open, and I want to tell you what's going on. Jared Kushner has it all wrong on the Palestinians. We don't know yet the details of the Israeli-Palestinian peace plan that the presidential advisor Jared Kushner is preparing. I do believe give him an A in effort, but there's some things he just doesn't understand. But we do know how Kushner perceives the Palestinian Arabs, and he's got them all wrong. The White House has released an official transcript of Kushner's June 24th interview with the Palestinian Arab newspaper Al-Quds. It shows that Kushner subscribes to the oldest myth of the conflict, that the average Palestinians are really just like us. By the way, they are not. Here's how he put it. I believe the Palestinian people are less invested in the politicians' talking points than they are in seeing how a deal would give them and their future generations new opportunities, more and better paying jobs, and prospects for a better life. They could care less about any of those things. Listen, I'll tell you why. It's often hard for Americans to grasp the fact that the values and concerns of the Palestinian Arabs are in fact radically different from those of America. Israel in the West. Average Palestinian Arabs really do want to destroy Israel. They really do hate the Jews. The political culture of their society is not the same as the democratic political culture of the United States or Israel. Better paying jobs are not their highest goal. You can blame their attitude on the Palestinian Authority's educational system. You can blame it on decades of anti-Jewish propaganda, on the PA's television and radio programs, and its newspapers and books. You can blame it on centuries of inoculation in the values of Islam and extreme Arab nationalism. But however you apportion the blame, it's a fact. In the interview, Kushner pleaded with the Palestinian readers, "Don't allow your grandfather's conflict to determine your children's future," he said. That's how Americans think, but that's not how Palestinians think. Americans put their grandfather's conflicts behind them. Palestinians consider their grandfather's agenda to be their agenda. My dream, Kushner told Al-Quds, is for Israel and the Palestinian people to be the closest of allies in combating terror, economic achievement, advancements in science and technology, and ensuring a lifestyle of brotherhood, peace, and prosperity. Yes, that's Kushner's dream. It's probably all of our dream. But that's not the Palestinians' dream. They're not interested in joining Israel to combating terror because they're the ones who perpetrate and glorify and financially reward terror. He said this, these people know their lives will only be improved by working out issues and moving on, said Kushner. Wrong again. He's the one who is interested in moving on. The Palestinians are not interested in moving on. The Palestinian people, he said, are industrious, well-educated, and adjacent to the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, Israel, Kushner continued. Israel's prosperity would spill over very quickly to the Palestinians if there is peace, he said. Does he think the Palestinians don't know that? Does he think that they are simpletons who have never noticed throughout the past century how Jewish development of the country has benefited them and could benefit them a lot more if they made peace? Of course they've noticed, but they've chosen to do otherwise. When Israel expelled all the Jews from Gaza, they left behind fully intact greenhouses for the Palestinians to use and enjoy and have produce throughout Gaza. And what did the Palestinians do? They burned them down. That doesn't make any sense. If the main concern of Palestinians is economic prosperity, why would they burn down the hothouses and greenhouses that would give them an economic prosperity? Because they care more about hating Jews than improving their own lives. Which is why I don't know whether to laugh or cry, he says, when I read Kushner's statement that the people of Gaza are hostages to bad leadership. It's time for the Palestinian Authority and Hamas to stop using the people of Gaza as pawns, he says. Well, they're not hostages, and they're not pawns. They freely elected Hamas in a democratic election. They've chosen to march by the thousands and tens of thousands to the Gaza fence to throw Molotov cocktails at Israelis and sail flaming kites to burn down their fields. Nobody forced them to do that, or to go there. Nobody forced them. So yes, there's a lot of hatred and a lot of scar tissue, Kushner concluded, but I do not underestimate humanity's and humankind's ability to love. He doesn't underestimate it, he overestimates it. Offering the Palestinian Arabs better paying jobs will not transform them from more warmongers to peacemongers. It would take a complete overhaul of the PA's media and school system, followed by generations of enlightened leadership and education to change their values and attitudes. Now, I know I'm reading a lot to you tonight, but I want you to really hear it. If Jared Kushner's dangerously naive belief about the Palestinians' ability to love is shaping the Trump Middle East peace plan, then Friends of Israel have reason to be deeply concerned, and I'm deeply concerned. The Palestinians do not have the same goals that we have. The Palestinians from babies are taught to kill Jews. From babies, they're taught that Jews are not humans. You have to unteach that, and it takes generations. So they're not going to just change because you offer them a job. Netanyahu says this, Israel will hit Iran through Syria and not only along the border. So Netanyahu phoned both Putin and Trump and said, here's the deal. I'm going to let you know that there's things building up in Iran and some things building up in Syria, and Iran is bringing their troops there. And I am telling you right now, I'm going to destroy all their troops along the border of Israel, and I'm going to go deep into Syria and do it. And obviously, they didn't say a thing to him. And you also heard about Harley Davidson. They sank as much as 2.6% Tuesday after President Donald Trump derided the motorcycle maker over its decision to move assembly workers overseas in response to new retaliatory tariffs from the European Union. But what you don't know, maybe you don't know this, is that Harley was planning to do that before this. This was just an excuse for them. Harley said the European tariffs would have an annual impact of $90 million on them. Harley Davidson believes the tremendous cost increase, if passed to its dealers and retail customers, would have an immediate and lasting detrimental impact. Trump went on to threaten the company with high taxes in retaliation for moving manufacturing jobs overseas. He said this, and this is what most people don't know and don't carry on. Early this year, Harley Davidson said they would move much of their plant operations in Kansas to Thailand, Trump tweeted. That was long before tariffs were announced. He said in a separate tweet, hence they were just using tariffs and trade war as an excuse. Shows how unbalanced and unfair trade is. Harley must know that they won't be able to sell back to the United States without paying a big tax. By the way, Harley Davidson has fallen 20% this year. One of the things that really amazed me was the fact that I was listening to NPR, and I was amazed that I heard this, and they interviewed people from Harley Davidson that were going to lose their jobs, and they said, are you upset with Trump? 95% of them said, no, he's doing the absolute right thing. Even if we lose our job, he's doing the right thing. So they know. Let me give you a couple more. I know this is going long tonight, but this is a moral decline, and this is something that I don't even like to say these things because basically I'm tired of hearing them, to be honest with you. But this is children's cartoon drag tots to feature baby drag queens. Still think children's cartoons are innocent, harmless, and entertainment? Think again. In the summer of 2018, there's not one but two new animated series that openly promote the drag queen lifestyle to children. Both aimed at young children, they represent another tactic of gender radicals who are increasingly focusing their propaganda efforts on the youngest, most vulnerable members of society. Here's my take on this. So people can choose to do whatever they want. That's their choice. We are to love people. Let me tell you what's happening in America. People are doing what they feel like doing. I'm a Christian. There are certain things of Christianity I don't feel like doing. You can't live by your feelings. Let me give you an example. When I first got saved and Cheryl said that we're supposed to give 10% of our income to God, I said, I don't feel like it. She said, no, it's in the Bible. I said, I don't care, I don't feel like it. She says, no, it's in the Bible, you have to do it. And I said, and she told me the reason why. I was young, I didn't know anything about Scripture. I said, oh, okay, well, if it's an act of obedience, I'll do it even though I don't feel like it. Listen, I know the truth is when somebody hits me, I came from a very violent past. If somebody hits me, you know what my first reaction? I'm going to plow into them. I don't feel like not hitting them. Now today I'm a little different, but back then, man, I was a Christian, I loved God with all my heart, but if somebody hit me, man, I want to hit them back. I feel like hitting them back. I remember telling Cheryl that. One person was getting on my nerves. I was saved about a year. I said, I'm going to hurt him. And she said, you can't do that. You cannot do that. I said, I found a scripture verse. Freely you've received, now freely give. And she said, no, you can't use scripture like that. There's a lot of things we don't feel like doing. Is that right? But our world today is going by their feelings. And here's the deal. If I said to you that I'm going to have an adulterer tell little kids about adultery and have little model adulterers, you'd be up in arms. So what happens is we have feelings. And by the way, it's the same reason why people are sympathetic and don't want to tell anybody anything, because we feel for people. I feel for somebody who feels they're trapped in their body. I feel in a different body. I feel for them. I genuinely feel for them. I don't know that feeling, so I want to have compassion and love. But I can't live my life by my feelings. Look, love, we think love's a feeling. Love's an act of your will. The Bible says that Jesus loved us and went to the cross for us. That couldn't have felt good. Come on. So what's happening, we have a society, if it feels good or if it feels good to me, I'm going to do it. That's totally contrary to Christianity. Christianity gives us guidelines for our own selves. How many are with me tonight? So when I see something like this, it's like, why would you impress on little kids that don't have, by the way, the prefrontal cortex isn't developed until they're 21. Why would you push this on them? When it's maybe 8 to 9% of society, why would you push that on them? And by the way, they're making them superheroes. And so the LGBT community is wanting to push everything in the face of everybody else. And basically, I think it's wrong. I think it's just as wrong as pushing an adulterer in little comics in the face of everyone else. We have to have some moral guidelines. Somebody say, and even though that doesn't feel good to some people, it's what the Bible tells us to do. So, I'll get lots of cards and letters, and it's okay. I want you to understand, you should never hate anyone. You should never say, oh, I hate this, or I hate this homosexual. I don't think you should ever be in a picket line going against somebody and tell them they're going to hell. I think that's the worst thing on the planet you can do. I think you have convictions, and I think the other worst thing you can do is let your convictions go. You have to stand up for your convictions. Because God, the Bible says it's the authoritative rule, the Bible is, of faith and conduct. Not your feelings. Your feeling is not the rule of your faith and conduct. How many are with me? It's the Bible. All right, let me give you this one. Moral decay. Criticize child abuse on Facebook, get banned for hate speech. Posting a video on Facebook in which an adult is seen enthusiastically indoctrinating very young children in the wonders of being homosexual, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, a gay icon, or at the very least a gay ally is just fine. But criticizing that same video on Facebook, however mildly, is hate speech. That's the bizarre message the social media giant delivered to Robert A.J. Gandon, Ph.D., former associate professor of the New Testament at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, who was blocked from Facebook for 2 days for supposedly engaging in hate speech when he briefly criticized the shocking video. So you'd have convictions. By the way, I want you to continue to understand some of these things that are happening are the hot potatoes of the church. These are the hot potatoes that are dividing families. And we need to have love, but we also need to be able to be someone that's going to say, listen, I have morals and I have some things in guidelines. You with me tonight? All right, let me give you one last thing. So this is happening today, and let me get to it and show you. It's under religion. And I know this is going long tonight, but this is the World Council of Churches. That is a bad phrase, by the way, because it's a one-worldism. The World Council of Churches said it's partnering with the Vatican Department of Promoting Integral Human Development in preparing the conference to be held on September 17th to 20th as part of the ongoing work toward peace building and migration. The general of the WCC, there's his name, said the meeting would be a very useful and significant workshop to dig a bit deeper into the problems of xenophobia and the expression of populism, as well as its links to racism, conflict, violence in countries around the world. Last September, the Vatican launched a 2-year campaign to change people's minds about migrants and to encourage a more welcoming attitude towards them worldwide. By the way, I just heard today on the news coming in, I just heard that Europe is going absolutely wild with their migrant population. They're trying to shut it down in every one of their countries because their crimes are going up and things are happening and they're changing. It says, brothers, we mustn't be afraid to share the journey. We mustn't be afraid to share the hope. Francis said in his weekly general audience on September 27th, in which he inaugurated the new project titled Share the Journey. You know why migrants are coming out of Muslim countries? Because Islam doesn't work. So what we need to do is, instead of just taking all migrants in, we need to be able to bring migrants in and say, tell us about your religion. Tell us about Islam. Tell us why you're fleeing your country. Why are people trying to kill you? And maybe have some type of understanding about introducing them to something that may be godly. But you know you can't do that with the government, right? So, let me give you one last one here. Well, actually one last one. And I'm going long tonight, I know that. This is the Hadron Collider. That's the one that's smashing particles in Bern, Switzerland. 36-mile loop. They're putting particles, and by the way, I know it's way beyond most of our brains, but they're taking protons and they're accelerating them to almost the speed of light, and they're smashing them into each other. When they do that, the potential, theoretically, is to create a black hole. If they create a black hole, you and I are gone. Now, we know they're not going to do that, but the offset of this is very damaging. They don't know what they're doing. They're altering time in little bits of time. They're altering it. They're doing a lot of strange things. Well, this week, they said that they are going to put in, I think it was $160 billion to beef it up so they can accelerate 100 times the particles that they're normally accelerating. So man fooling with being God is never going to work out good. All right, that's all the news, but I thought I'd do something different for you tonight as I end the news. I thought I'd give you a little levity. So I titled this Only In. All right? Only in Texas. It's a cow wash. Only in Hawaii. Only in Alabama. Only in America. It's an escalator to a fitness. And this is an actual unretouched photo. These next two, I almost couldn't believe it. I had to search them out. Only in India, where travel is really hard. That's a train. All right, how many of you like to go in the pool every now and then? Only in China. This is a pool, by the way, a public pool. All right, so how many of you are really excited about where you live? That's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask the ushers if they come forward. Man, can you imagine going swimming in it?